I will call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. So this meeting is being recorded by 1623 Studios for future broadcasts, also being recorded by the Board of Selectmen Secretary Sonia Nathan for accuracy in minutes. Anybody else is recording the meeting is asked to notify the chair at this time. I will ask that everybody please silence their cell phones.
And their soda bottles.
And their soda bottles. And item number 0 is usually public comment, but we don't have anybody who's not here for something that's not on the agenda, so we'll pass. Item number 1 is a review of personnel handbook, the second round of this review for us. So, Greg, do you want to comment?
So this has been a process that's been underway for the past few months. We've been utilizing our human resource consultant, Aaron Stewart from Insight. And it's been a process of working with a number of staff. All staff have had an opportunity to comment on it. We've received very few comments. So I think it's in good shape. It's an update, getting us up to speed with current laws and best practices, and it's ready for your final approval.
So what, how did we provide the opportunities for the staff to see it? I'm just curious.
So
Is it
we
at
had
staff meetings? or-
staff meetings, presentation discussions.
Okay.
There was the formal hearing. It was emailed to everybody,
Got it.
and or at least they were told about it through an email, and where they could pick up a hard copy if they wanted. And all department heads received copies. And then coming up, we will hold a couple of trainings for all staff once it's been finalized by you. Then we have a couple of sessions scheduled in the next few weeks to go over it, as well as to go over a recent satisfaction survey that we provided to all staff.
Great. Well, I think the group that worked on it did a yeoman's job. I know there was a lot there. To review it and update it and get feedback and make changes and update again. I think they've done a nice job and spent a fair amount of time on it, and as long as there's a comfort level that staff has had the opportunity to see it and comment, we should be good to go.
There was one thing that,
I have a couple questions. You want to go first?
no, go ahead, I'm trying to find where I made my note.
Greg, I had a couple of questions. One was on the notes of the public hearing on the editing changes. That change from 20 years to 17 years for earned from 17 years up to 20 years for changed for 5 weeks vacation. Was that a typo or a change that has some impact on CBAs?
So it doesn't impact collective bargaining units, 'cause this is for non-collective bargaining unit folks. And what it did was, currently we have, so you get the 5 years after 20 years, so we want to be consistent with that, but the current plan has you gaining 1 day a year between 15 and 20. So you had 4 weeks and a day at 16
At
years.
16 and going up?
Yeah, yeah.
And that was changed, that progressive change was
So this-
taken out?
Correct.
And why was that taken out?
Ease of administration, B, that in looking at other communities, there's very few communities that give 5 weeks before 20 years. I don't know if we found any. So that was why.
The only other question I had was on the whole section on town driving permit procedures.
Bribing?
driving permit procedures.
I missed that section.
And on page 14, it says, "An applicant for employment will not be hired if his or her driving record reflects," and there's a series of fairly serious offenses that are there. Is that only for town driving applicants? In other words, employees for whom their duties involve driving for the town?
Right, correct.
So employees who don't have such duties, or are working in an office, for instance, they don't even have their driving record reviewed.
Well, it would be part of the sort of background check, but it's not a depository in terms of a fatal flaw in their hiring. But it might be part of a total background review. And if there are other issues, that's sort of one of a number of issues that come up, then that could be a factor.
So should this handbook reflect that an applicant for employment will not be hired if his or her driving record reflects? I mean, this is a very straightforward statement. If any of these things are there, you're not going to be hired. That only applies to those who have town driving as part of their duties? I understand what you're saying, that if there's a
So
whole...
it says any covered employee without a valid driver's license.
On page 14,
Yeah,
in the third arrow bullet in, an applicant for employment will not be hired.
oh, if it has DUI, yes. Is that what,
Now, my question is, does this only apply
To those that are
to those who
required to
have driving
drive.
as a duty? And I understand what you said, that if they've got things on their query check that come up, that's going to
Right.
be important to take into consideration. But this is definitive. An applicant will not be hired if they have any of these things, if they have driving as a duty. Should it be reflected in the language of the handbook that that's only applicable to those specifically who have that duty?
yes, I believe it should. I'm just trying to see if it says that over in,
When I looked at the language preceding that on the bottom of page 13 and going forward, I didn't see it.
Yep,
So
yep.
it's a small point, but I think it's an important one because it differentiates employees who have such duties and those who don't.
Right, so, well, we can make it clear. So it does say, on page 13, under motor vehicle record check policy, it says, "The town of Manchester by the Sea seeks to safeguard employees and others when the operation of a motor vehicle is required in the course of conducting." So we can clarify it, that is indeed where this applies.
It's not I mean, it's not applicable to people whose driving for the town is not required.
But that's, I think, the clarification he's seeking.
That's what I'm seeking,
Yeah.
is that this is very specific to
And
those
so
employees who have
we-
that duty.
we can reiterate that where the bullet points are here.
Okay, I appreciate that, because I think that
Good.
clarifies the
At
differentiation.
page 14. No, that's a good catch.
Okay, any other items?
Not by me. Not on this go-round.
All right, you're looking for a motion from us to approve?
I am.
All right, can I get a, yep,
We just need to be sure we include in the
Yeah.
motion
yeah.
with Jeff's
Mhm.
edit or request, whatever,
Thank you.
whatever we're gonna call it.
Request for clarification of
Yes.
the driving
Nitpick,
policy.
nitpick.
No.
No, that was good.
So I'll make a motion to approve the personnel handbook with a request to make the necessary clarification
on page 14.
On page 14, is that the page? That was discussed.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, item 2.
Nice
Uh,
work.
Yep, a request for a new public tree policy. So I'm assuming you're here for that. All right. Why
So
don't
the-
you come on up to the front too, and we can discuss this.
So, the Friends have been working on, with me and Chuck and Kay, on a proposed set of policies for trees. I think they would like another go-round to fine-tune it some beyond what you see in your package. So we don't need to go in a lot of specific detail tonight, but it would be helpful to know from your perspective if this is a direction you're willing to support, and if you have some additional thoughts on what we haven't included yet, or concerns about a portion of it that we can continue to work on.
So, so broadly, I thought it was pretty reasonable. I would like to see the 50% of a tree at its base clarified in such a way that, you know, a reasonable arborist, 2 reasonable arborists would come up with the same answer. And I'm not sure that it is that way right now. I hear of arborists talk about root flares, and they have a pretty good definition for where that is. They can usually agree where that is. But 50% of what? 50% of the circumference? 50% of the cross-sectional area? I'd like to see that put in terms that people are not going to be arguing a lot over. Otherwise, we're just going to get appeals.
And I just wanted to say at the outset, reading through the policy, which I think is a great start, I potentially am going to have a tree that might fit under here. If I don't, I have a relative direct abutter who definitely will, so I'll put my 2 cents in, but as we creep closer to some kind of policy, may recuse myself from actually voting it. Just wanted to say that up front. Didn't occur to me till I started to read this and looked out front of my house.
You know, and I'll-
So I guess one of the questions or wonder I have is there a formal job description for the tree warden? Do you know? Anywhere?
So prescribed by statute, yes. I'm not sure if
The
we have
town- we
one
don't
in
but
house.
prescribed by statute, so I guess, because I was reading number 2, the town tree warden authority and responsibilities, and we
Yeah.
need to just double check what the statute says to make sure that what ends up in the short-term and then long-term policy jive and make sense, agree with each other. And I do also agree with the 50% concern or thought. I don't think it should be any larger than that, because then I do think we could find ourselves in a very vast tree
Really?
inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has anybody gone around to see just how many trees would actually fall under this at that, if it goes forward as written now, which there will be modifications? Absolutely, yes, please. Thank you. But I also want to say, I think it's a great idea. We do need to take care of our trees.
Yes, so in speaking with Greg, we discovered it's just nice to have the procedure written down and to make sure
Oh,
that things are
definitely.
clear. So that's,
Yeah.
and of course, our desire is to protect as many trees as we possibly can.
Right.
To answer your question about inventory, so there was a $5,000 grant given to the DPW. They did have a gentleman walk around most recently last summer and inventory street trees as per some guidelines that Chuck Dam and his department had laid down, which was the be 5 foot from the right-of-way, if I'm correct. So that gave us a pretty small number, I would say, relative to older inventories that were done. I confess the older inventories are 20 years old, 40 years old, and were done by all volunteers, but were accepted by, let's say, the Mass DPR and DCR and Mass DEP. So yeah, it's just a matter of rectifying those two and clarifying those two inventories.
The other, I guess, the town tree warden, and this kind of speaks to what you said, it seems there will be a good number more responsibilities. And how would this be handled in terms of the town warden's amount of time being given to the town? That
So
would
it
be-
would certainly increase.
Mhm.
And certainly from the Friends' perspective, and we have talked about providing, so right now, we don't provide a stipend
Right.
to the tree warden, and it's something that I
It's
think
just-
we would need to look at.
Yeah.
yeah.
Can I jump in there as
Yes.
well? So Friends of Manchester Trees did put in a request for a grant through the Cape Ann Community Foundation. The hope and desire was to create more funds for the tree warden to take that responsibility more seriously and to give that person a little bit more motivation. As per the Cape Ann Community Foundation's desires, they want to increase the beauty and bring as many people here as possible, but also increase job possibilities. So we were hoping that our current town tree warden would train the next generation to take over from there. And again, we wanted to help create an attractive position. So I can provide you with the documentation. The grant was not given to us. We'll probably hit it again next year because it's an annual thing. But it is my hope and desire to speak with the FinCom as well and whomever you suggest about some more funds that would go towards the tree warden stipend, and Friends of Manchester Trees is certainly ready to put up some money as well. We pay him a $500 stipend per annum and would certainly double that willingly. And then just talk about it from there, whatever makes sense in terms of how much time that person is spending.
Okay, and then I did have just a couple, is it too premature to make comments on any specifics, or just?
No, go ahead.
I feel that where it talks about 1C, 2A, the tree warden, let's see. Where did I do that? There was, it was two different things. One where there's input from the Friends. So this is regarding Part 1C, trees of singular merit, including heritage, as determined by the town tree warden with input from Friends. I just, it's a nitpicky thing, but I think it should be non-binding input. And then regarding the town tree and responsibility, all right, my writing doesn't match up with what I put. Well, we'll come back to that one another. Then on item 4, removal and replacement of town trees. It says prior to removal, that it must be approved by the town tree warden. And that actually comes under the Board of Selectmen. So I don't think that definitely would have input from the town tree warden. But that's not a decision the town tree warden would be making.
Indeed, I believe we've updated a copy, perhaps since this one went out with you, when I spoke with Greg in our last round of meetings, and we understood that that was the case. So
Oh, okay, 'cause
we'll make
that
sure
was-
that we
that
put
one
that.
was in there.
We'll put that in as well.
Okay. But I think this is wonderful. I think we need to start looking after our trees much more than, well, nothing's been done, much has been done, so, and we all need to take care in that.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Yes, so any advice you can offer us as well to move the process through? I'm new to how the financial committee works, how it would go with the Board of Selectmen. So for making requests to potentially increase the tree maintenance budget for the DPW or whomever would touch trees in various public areas, I also much appreciate any feedback there.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I do, one concern I have about the tree warden is pretty easy to expand that job to the point where it would require a significant salary, and either we just wouldn't be able to attract the time required. If somebody sees it taking them too little time but too much time, then they just won't do the job at all. Or if it's going to take more like 20 hours a week for 4 or 5 months, then it's going to be a significant impact to the budget. Requires a little bit of care and attention.
I need to make a comment that my wife is on the board of Manchester Friends of the Trees. However, I don't believe that interferes with my ability to give input into this policy. So I'm particularly concerned that we have an accurate representation of the inventory of trees. It seems like the inventory that you just mentioned that was done a year ago on the grant to DPW went within a particular boundary that may or may not conform to what becomes this policy. Whatever that inventory is has an impact on the maintenance costs, the intensity of the duties that you were just referring to, Eli, of the tree warden in evaluating trees, and making recommendations for either maintenance and or removal and replacement. So I don't want to slow this process down because I think it needs to be really clarified what the policy is. But I really think that an accurate inventory that's updated needs to be done. And it concerns me that we're going to be trying to cobble it together between what was done last year and what was done 20 years ago.
Well, the inventory that was done 20 years ago, was that based off of a wider right-of-way?
So my understanding of that inventory is that it went 12 feet in from the
Right.
right-of-way, so yes,
So it'd be considerably larger, and this new inventory would probably be reduced from that.
yes.
Wow.
My understanding was the new inventory was based on 5 foot from the right-of-way.
Yeah.
And it also, I believe, took in criteria such as if a tree falls behind a wall, it is no longer a town tree, or if there's a fence.
Right. So this one's going to be more like 10 foot from the right-of-way with a different definition for the, for partial encroachments.
I'm not 100% sure how to answer that.
Right.
So I.
But
need to
I
look
do
at it.
agree, we need to, whatever the policy we eventually come to, we do need to go through and make a very particular inventory.
I think you're right.
Could be a wonderful Eagle Scout project for someone
Oh, there
Yeah.
you go.
to work with
Yeah.
Friends of the Trees in the
That's a
town.
great idea,
Yeah.
yes.
But I'm not sure that there's I don't have a huge concern that we're going to be capturing an enormous number of new trees with this definition over the 20-year previous inventory.
But there's a considerable discrepancy between the two numbers.
Yes, well, the one that we did recently was based on a very, very narrow distance from the right-of-way, and we weren't happy with that because it was so different from the previous definitions that everybody had 20 years ago.
And the practice more than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I can also add that, so it was street trees that were captured, so cemeteries were not included, school grounds were not included, and and parks were not included either. So
Those are all town land anyway, right? Yeah. Okay.
But at some point need to be
Yeah,
counted.
those need to be
They
counted.
need to
Yeah.
be included because it
that's
all
yeah.
becomes the bigger maintenance
Right,
thought,
That's true.
conversation.
Yep.
yep.
All right. Anybody else have any other input, feedback?
That give you some more to work with?
oh yeah, we've always got our work cut out for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for the work on that.
Thank you, Sue.
Yes.
And we will see you again sometime soon. All right. Item number 3, Shellfish Constable update. An update on something that a position we had not had filled for a long time.
Thank you for.
If you could do me a favor, step up to the podium, grab a microphone, introduce yourself, and give us your update.
I'm Jim Elder, and again, thank you for putting me in this position. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the next year and see what we can get done. I wanted to just bring you up to date, as you said, and let you know we've been working on a little bit about what we're thinking for the future, and I have one request. So this all started about 1.5 years ago, as far as I'm concerned. I was reading an article about how all the shellfish beds in Salem Sound are closed except for one at Devereaux Beach and Marblehead, and trying to figure out what I could do about that situation, because it wasn't so much about the shellfish, it was about the water quality of Salem Sound. Shellfish are a great indicator of what the status of your, in this case, ocean ecosystem is, and it was of concern to me. So I went to Barbara Warren and said, what do I do? What can I do? And she said, well, actually I said, what is it going to take to open the shellfish beds? And she said, I don't really know, but it starts with testing the water on the beaches where there may be shellfish. And she said, we can get, she thought she could convince the stream team to do some of the sampling, which they've very kindly done for the last 1.5 years. But we needed to get the Division of Marine Fisheries to do the testing. So we went in to see them, they agreed to do it, and that's been going on for, as I say, 1.5 years. We had a wonderful meeting with them where they came over about 2 months ago, May 13th, and gave us a report on their results. And the basic summary of that was that gray and white beaches do meet their approved standards during this study period. I think it's either 15 or 18 months. Black beach did not meet the approved standards during the study period, but it had the potential to get approval with defined conditions, and I frankly don't remember what those conditions were. And the Black Beach pollution sources needed further investigation to understand their impact on the area. There's a suspicion that it may be at least partially septic systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there was an intent to talk to the Board of Health about that. So that's one of the next steps. And another next step is that we don't really know what's out there. So we could go through a lot of work, and everybody might get excited about opening a particular beach to find that there's really not much there.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step is also to do a resource survey. Not a big deal. All volunteers. We're hoping to get it done in September. It won't be hugely precise, but it'll give us a good idea of what's there. So with that, and with perhaps some more information on the beaches, the pollution sources, hopefully we'll be able to come back to you later in the winter, early in the spring, with some suggestions, some ideas, some recommendations. Brian's been particularly helpful with all this, as well as the stream team.
May I?
Yes.
Quickly, I'd just like Lynn Atkinson and Francie Caudill for 15 months went out monthly in horrendous conditions through the winter and everything to do the water testing and do the different testing, so I want to make sure that they get kudos.
Thank you.
So the one request is that And actually, if you guys have anything else to add to that little summary, please feel free.
If you want to take the mic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Jessica Lamoth, Chair of the Manchester Coastal Stream Team. I just wanted to add that the Black Beach bacteria stuff has been something we've been studying for I don't even know how many years now. And we've worked with the Board of Health, and they've identified, there were some failing septic systems, but now it's been so long that we think there's some that have, kind of been 10 years again. So we're still doing the water testing this summer. Barbara Warren and Salem Sound Coast Watch, they're doing this DNA testing that we still don't have the results on to determine, is it human or bacteria? I mean, it might turn out all to be the ducks and things that get fed along there and that feeds into Clark Pond. So we're still assessing all that and getting more information that will be part of this, but the inventory would be a really helpful, again, so that we know, is it worth even doing? If there's no clams there, then, we're going to still keep looking for the bacterial sources regardless, but we support this effort as well.
When you get the results of that, can you shoot us a letter from the stream team giving us a little update?
Yeah. It might be straight from Barbara and Salem Sound Coast Watch. Yeah.
Yep.
You want to add anything?
I'm just very peripheral in all of this. These folks are the ones doing all the work. I don't even know if I can qualify as moral support, but I will.
Yes, you can.
Hats off to all of them. I think this is fantastic.
Great. So my one request is that when DMF came over to present the results of their work, they did ask that if you all were supportive, that you send a note to them asking them officially to continue the testing. They don't absolutely have to have that, but they thought it would be important for them to have it in their records.
Mhm.
So I have a little draft note here, which I'll be happy to give to Greg. It just says, we'd be grateful if you'd be able to continue to mount water quality testing in the future. It's not a big deal.
Good.
So can I get a motion from the board to author a letter to the Department of Marine Fisheries supporting the efforts to reopen our shellfish beds?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we'll write that up, we'll sign it and get it off.
You want this little draft, Greg, or you want to?
Well, if
Yeah,
you have
give
it,
it
I'll
up.
take it.
Are there any other questions? Feel free to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want that signed by the whole board or just the town administrator, or?
Whatever you think.
All right, we'll take care of it.
Thank you
Probably
very
more.
much.
Yeah, thank
My
you.
pleasure, thank you.
I think if we all sign, it
ask you one
kind of
question?
means a little bit more. Yeah.
You're focusing on beds, you mentioned White Beach, Black Beach, Gray Beach. Any other places that,
When we first started, DMF said, pick the ones that you think are most likely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
They said, we think, we're pretty sure there's some shellfish resources in the outer harbor area,
Mhm.
the very beginning of it. But the odds of getting anything open there are really slim because of the sewage treatment plant, because of all the boat traffic. So don't think about that. Politics of Sand Dollar Cove, Long Beach, we didn't particularly want to get into, at least yet.
right away?
Right away. There is Chubb Creek, the beach over there. That's pretty small. So a Singing Beach, for some, I think we decided there wasn't much there. So black, white, and gray seem to be the most promising. But that was just a gut call. I'm missing any beaches. Stinky Beach.
Shaky Beach.
Yeah.
I would say that DMF is right in this approach. There hasn't been any shellfish beds open here. For decades.
Right.
Let's get some open. Let's have success.
Yeah.
And then look at these other spots and see if we can move on from it. Because there are shellfish in other places. We know, people tell me. So, it's a good approach, I think. My opinion.
All right, thank you. So we'll be expecting to hear from you a little later on this winter then.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Great,
thank you very
thank
much, and
you.
thanks for your effort. All right. Move on to item number 4, reviewing strategies for
you.
communications and community engagement. Greg, you want to?
So we've been talking a lot about this for the last couple of years now. And so we keep putting energy into it. We've tried a few things. And there's been a desire on multiple levels to put together a comprehensive strategy for communication and engagement. So I put together sort of a shopping list, if you will, or laundry list, or whatever cliche I want here, of different strategies, different efforts that we can embark on. Was interested in your critique of those number of items, and also, so 2 pieces. One is, what are the strategies themselves, and then how do we best ramp up in terms of resources for staffing and/or consultants to help with that. So I think it would make sense to first talk about the strategies themselves and different activities, and then talk a bit about the staffing piece. So we currently do a number of things. So on the back side of that handout, there's a list of the different things we do, your updates in the Cricket weekly, along with, I normally have an article every week. It's not ironclad, but most weeks we do. Those are also posted online. We certainly have the town website. The police have their website. Fire department has a website. Park and Rec has a website as well. Again, multiple Facebook pages, town, police, Park and Rec. We developed the news portal last year with the help of Guilfoyle PR. A number of other things. People subscribe to the webpage where they can get notices for when things are newly posted. We have the reverse 911 capacity. We tend to use that very sparingly, but it is a means of communication. The Parks and Recs have their program booklet. Brian has his newsletter. You've done newsletters in the past. We haven't done those recently, but it's something that was done for a while. We could go back to that. One of the suggestions is we could do it as a mailer within the bills that we send out. So we send out 4
Right.
tax bills a year, and we send out 4 water sewer bills a year.
Right.
So it'd be easy to put a front and back, double-sided piece of paper into each of those at very little cost in terms of the actual mailing to the households. And that would go to every household, virtually every household. We do have a Twitter account. We are not that active on it for the town. Police are more active on theirs. We do get coverage in the daily Gloucester Daily Times. It's not every day, but we do get some coverage there, and obviously coverage in the Cricket. So those are smattering of things that we currently do. And then in terms of what additional things we could be doing, I mentioned those potentially up to 8 newsletters every year, combined with those mailings that we are already doing with the billing. Many towns do citizen academies, where they will hold a 4-session or up to a 10-session academy, they call them, for basic government functioning and how different departments operate, how town government functions, ways to participate. We could do more open houses or coffee hours for those.
I think that's a really nice idea.
What's that?
I like that idea.
Yeah, again, maybe not every year.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's something you do every other year to, and you get, you know, a couple dozen people perhaps attending each one. That would probably be a good turnout.
So, a few comments. So the quarterly or monthly newsletters that we were doing before, I think that those actually were having a pretty good effect.
Mhm.
I-
You mean what
the
we were
mailers that
putting
we
in
were
the mail?
putting
Yeah,
out, yeah.
I agree.
I think we should go back to doing either those or quarterly inserts into the, if the budget for that is too steep, quarterly inserts into the water bills would be good. I'd strongly support that. A while ago, I went to one of the Rotary meetings and gave them, they asked me to come in and give them a little talk about what was coming up for town business. I think events like that, it'd be a pretty good thing for board members to go to some of those periodically and give larger group updates on what we were doing and ask what their feedback is.
Agreed, but we also have to acknowledge that there's 5 of us and we all, well, Jeff is newly retired.
Yep.
Happily so. But getting to finding someone to get to a lot of those events is not as easy as it has been in the past.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's a nice option, but I don't feel like it's something we can rely on doing as a means of communication.
No, not as a primary means,
Right.
for sure, but I think it wouldn't hurt.
So I think we all get or know the platforms we're using and the various Facebook pages and websites and, you know, and most of that's working fairly well. I think the larger conversation or issue we're trying to figure out is how do we manage that? What's the best means to manage information going out and making sure that information gets out in a timely manner. The shared services report that's coming,
Mhm.
is that the next meeting?
Yes.
And does that touch upon the HR piece potentially? Because that's also part of this whole bigger thing
Right,
we're
it does,
trying
it
to
does,
figure out.
it does suggest that we explore
Okay.
a shared position
Okay.
on that.
Because at one point, we kind of talked about, do we wrap something like a
Mhm.
communications staff member into the whole
Right.
HR thing?
Right.
I think we need to keep those separate. I think HR is a animal all on its own now, just there's so much that changes for employees and benefits, and
Yep.
I just think if there's an opportunity to do a shared service with another community in that regard, in my opinion, that's where that needs to be. So that then we're just looking at the communications piece. We bantered around a little, some
Yep.
short conversation about assistant town administrator. So do we wrap that into the whole communications piece? You know, is that ideal person out there that can handle some assistant town administrator duties along with the
The
communication
communications, right,
pieces?
right.
I don't know if there's job descriptions out there with other smaller communities that kind of make it look
Well,
like
actually,
it can work, or
Danvers' assistant is in charge of
is
communications.
in charge of
Yeah,
communications.
so that's a very local example
Right,
of where that is the case.
right. I mean, that's kind of when we've talked about it in other meetings on a short-term conversation basis, that's kind of where I've gone in my head every time, is, to me, it feels logical that there is a body that we need. The determination needs to be part-time, full-time, and that's, I think, more to figure out.
Yep.
And then just exactly what are we looking to accomplish with that individual? I mean, we all know that the frustration in the community seems to be nobody knows what we're doing. There's lots of different platforms that we're using, but apparently it's not, maybe we're not focused enough in those platforms, or it's just not, you know, if it falls under one individual's responsibility, does that create more focus using those platforms to get information out?
And
I
that's,
don't know.
that's really what, you know, where my thoughts are, less about all the different things that, you know, responsibilities they could have, but the key responsibility being, what are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not? And why, if something is working, why is that? Because I think that what I've heard from people, and yes, we have quite a lot of ways that we try to communicate with people, and get and disseminate information in a timely fashion. We do this, but there are, I think, many people who still feel that for whatever reason, they're not finding out about things until it's either too late or, well, after the fact. Even though, you know, we do put things out, if people are feeling that they're not finding out about it until too late or after the fact, then what we're doing isn't working. Now, I still believe you can lead the horse to water, and there is without a doubt that aspect that comes into play a lot. But I would be more concerned with someone who can help us to figure out what we're doing right and why we're doing it right, and what we're doing wrong and why. Is that?
So finding somebody who can tell us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, I think that's going to be challenging.
That'll be very
But,
challenging.
But I do,
because-
but one thing that I do think is key in what's being outlined here
Mhm.
is like the second paragraph about how the coordinator assists departments in managing their
Yeah.
communications
Yes.
needs. One of the things that we could really do a better job of is making sure that all the different departments that might have a stake in a particular project, that their message is part of what's being communicated. And whenever a department does anything that's going to be visible, publicly visible, have an impact, a change to the residents' view of the town, then it should be considered for some kind of communications effort. And I think we're a little bit spotty in how we deal with that right now. So if we formalize that, a coordinator can establish a standard for that. I think that in and of itself might go a long ways to fixing some of the issues that we've had.
Well, for example, in terms of communication, we have a little hydrant flushing sign that's been at the end of Pine Street for how long now? Months? Not years. This one has been there, and you know, so that's misinformation, because they're not doing it every single Thursday. We're starting every Thursday.
Do you have thoughts?
I
He
have
has
ma-
many
I
thoughts.
have many thoughts.
Fire away.
I think that one of the things that when people think about communication today as opposed to 10 or 15 years ago, is everybody jumps onto the idea that social media is going to be the form of communication, it's going to be effective. But there are a lot of people that do not participate in social media or used to participate in social media and no longer participate in social media, myself included, because of all the dredging that you have to go through to get any information. So I think it's really important not to fall back on, oh, we're publishing on social media. Just like, you know, from my own experience of trying to get communication going out through websites, that people don't go to websites. There's some real challenges about how you get to people. I think that the Board of Selectmen newsletter that went out through the mail was an excellent way of communicating, because it comes in the mail and people open the mail and they see this, and if they're going to throw it away, they've got the information that's being communicated in their hands, which is a lot tougher to determine if you're using social media or websites, that they don't necessarily have that communication in hand. Even with subscription services and things like that, there are a lot of people who are not savvy enough to, or interested enough to subscribe to a web service. Or find that their inbox then gets cluttered and they reach for unsubscribe. So I'm curious about some things that I don't understand in the information you gave us. Things like what a Nextdoor platform is.
That's another social media platform.
It's another social media.
It is where people could go on and say things like, okay, I have a snow blower I don't need, who wants it?
Right.
Or a fox was seen running after somebody's cat. You know, you can do everything from very simple stuff to
Right.
more. But that does require internet capabilities.
The use of technology.
Yes,
of technology.
technology. And we do have, what is the average age of our town now? Our demographic is aging,
We're
right?
growing. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
aging.
Yeah, we're it. So, that and older, and they're,
Speak for yourself, Muff.
I am. We're
But
aging.
yeah.
So, I mean, is there a sense that, I think we all agree that communications is an issue.
Absolutely.
It's a struggle. We continue to make efforts to get word out to people. I think more of what this conversation needs to be about is, are we moving closer towards making the decision through the budgetary process to, create a position? And then if that is in fact what the decision is, then it tilts to, is it part-time, is it full-time? And then the conversations with the finance committee through the budgeting process as to how to fund it. Fundamentally, we need to decide, is a body, is a communications marketing individual someone we need
Right.
to help us take that giant step into making a better effort in communicating what's happening in our town.
Or do we, and to exactly what you're saying, or do we, when this person is where are we? Going to the department leaders to own their messaging and engage the residents, that it almost sounds like a person we could get in for a little while, implement, and then not be permanently around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't think so.
I think once you step in, it's a model that we'd need to be able to sustain.
So the thing is not every department head is going to be a master of communications
Yes.
by any means.
Yep.
What they can be told is what they should be aware of that needs to be communicated and when it should be brought to somebody's attention. And that can be trained. But the ability to craft the message and deliver it to the residents is a different one. So that's where I think the coordinator becomes a little bit more of a longer term position. Moreover, there are a lot of committees that are doing work, and I think gathering and being aware of the different things that are going on that might need to be communicated, and then possibly suggesting some coordination between departments on those items
That makes
is
sense.
probably going to be important. I don't think it's a full-time position. I think it's a part-time position. I think it's, but I do think it's something that we should keep in-house because it involves being sensitive to the culture of the town, which is
Yeah.
something which is going to be learned.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, yeah, so that's sort of where I'm thinking. And you want the departments to be, and we're not gonna take public input right now on this we're gonna work through this on the board level for a little bit.
Not tonight, you mean?
No.
No, I don't. It's not,
Well, if you let
we do a little
the
more
board have a
conversation.
discussion here.
Close the topic without me bringing you up to.
Okay.
The, so the coordinator's position, lost my train of thought. Well, I was mostly done with the point.
So is there a general sense that it's something that we should be pursuing?
I think it
I mean,
is
Greg has
because,
done a fair amount of work putting
Yeah.
together the opportunities that a position would be involved in, or some of the responsibilities that that this type of position, should we move forward, would have. Is there anything in these ideas that Greg's put down for us that you don't agree with?
no, I think
Okay.
we need help, and I think that's evident.
Right. Okay. Sure.
Did you have any more comments?
Not at the moment,
Yeah.
no.
Okay, Sheila.
Thanks. Sheila Hill, 2 Running Ridge Road. I wanted to bring this little communication strategy, which I found quite powerful. And I wanted to say something about communication. Communication, in its essence, has to be two-way. And I think one of the challenges of what all of the boards do and all of the committees is try to put out information without really any sense of what's understood, what's engaging, what are still the questions that remain. And, if I were to apply for such a position, I would be very committed to understanding if our communication is effective in terms of its two-wayness. I just think, I know you all have worked hard, and for many years I've been in the same place on the planning board and, wondering, oh, gosh, we said this. But, so this I thought was powerful. I'm just going to pass it around. I just came tonight really to say that. And one quick thing, I did put, as you might have seen, a letter to the editor in the paper last week, and I had initially included a request of feedback to you, Greg, and to Sue, and I had included your email addresses. And the Cricket removed the email addresses, and I didn't know if that was a matter of their policy agreement with you. Sue said she wanted the email addresses.
Yeah, I'm not sure. They didn't ask. She didn't ask.
So I think in terms of, again, the point around two-way communication, you all have to be willing to get communication back on what you put out. I mean, I don't know. I'll take that up with the cricket. Anyway, I'm going to pass this around. It is a request for, it was the city of Sarasota. They did I think probably a large master plan. And it is a request for input from the community in a very handy little business card size. On the back, the same material is printed in Spanish, which we probably don't need in this community. But it leaves a lot of space for questions. And so what I would see is that the main stakeholder committees or boards or departments, if it's going to be about safe streets or if it's going to be about a walkway in the harbor or whatever it's going to be about, this is small, it is inexpensive, and it is intimate. And that's what I think a lot of social media is not, any of those things. So I would just pass this around. I just really wanted to bring it into your consciousness as a potential tool. I just think it's pretty cool. And the thing is, there was a little holder, and these were sitting in shops.
That's what I was going to ask you.
over.
How do they get them out?
All over. But the other thing is, any one of you could, or any one of the chairs of any single effort, could have them made up and be handing them out to people. You should be, you could be handing these out at Crosby's or, at Singing Beach or whatever. And the point of having the questions on the back is to say, give us some feedback on this issue that we have listed in the front. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like, et cetera, et cetera. Okay,
Yep.
That's it.
Thank
That's
you,
all I
Sheila.
wanted to do.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good luck with this. I was really concerned. I saw 5% turnout at the town meeting. I thought, it's not good. We can do better than that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Cool. And that, I think, to looking at that is one of the important aspects, is it is little and it's so easily digested
So,
or digestible.
what, digestible?
Digestible.
So based on the feedback tonight, Greg, is this enough to kind of keep the ball moving a little bit more towards creation of a position to get a look at it? I mean, a lot of it is right here.
Right, so it'd be helpful to talk just a little bit more about.
Yep.
So we do have dollars enough to go with a part-time position.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the full dollars for combining it with a full-time.
Mm-hmm.
So is it something we want to move on now? I guess that's what I'm wondering. Are we ready to give it a try at a part-time position, or do we want to still think about combining it with a full-time position? If we're not ready to answer that today, I think we should be ready to answer the
On the
next
19th.
couple of weeks.
Yeah,
So,
no,
you
I
know,
think that's fair. Yep.
Yeah.
Are you talking about, when you say now, Greg, do you mean
This
this
fall.
fiscal year? Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
before the end of the,
So, when I
Before
say
the
now,
end
I
of this
mean
year.
hiring someone this fall.
right.
Or repurposing or doing whatever
Yes.
to fill the bill. And the full-time position that you were talking about, mixing in with that as opposed to the,
So there are different options. So, one was whether or not it's compatible with an HR position or not.
Yeah,
And are they just two different skill sets that is going to be very difficult to find into one person, which I tend to think is
yeah, and
the
I think,
case.
and I just think the needs are very different.
Right.
What we need in those two places, I just don't, like, the communications piece and the HR piece fit.
Right.
We thought maybe 6 months ago they might, but the more we've had time to delve into the real communications piece, it just doesn't make sense to me anyway to try to mesh the two. Because I
I would
think
agree.
then both sides of the needs are gonna get lost.
Right.
And if there is an opportunity to do that shared service piece with one of them, we do it that way.
So then we look at, so Sonia and I have had some conversations about maybe redefining what she does and freeing and reconfiguring what she wouldn't be doing
Yep, yep.
in another position. That's another option, and maybe that person could do both. We've talked about the assistant TA position. So we have these balls in the air, and
Right.
it's pretty soon we need to say, okay,
Right.
this is what we want to do.
And the assistant TA position rolled out of conversations over Greg's
Yes.
goals and
Yep, I remember that.
what we're looking to produce and get accomplished in the next couple of years is
Yeah.
where that assistant TA piece came into place. So from my perspective, I think that we need to, as a board, we should hone in on that and determine, is that still high on the importance list? And how, if it is, how do we fit it with the conversation about communications?
So when you think about the pieces, there's the communication piece, there's the HR piece, there's whether or not we redefine the executive assistant and office management piece. There's day-to-day operations, which if some of my time is freed up, I could put more to that in terms of HR work. There's procurement, grants, contract management, so there's lots of different pieces
Right.
that fit together in different ways. I mean, there's lots of ways to put the puzzle together. But I think we need to start narrowing down and making some decisions on which way we're going.
Right. Would you be able to, for us, put together in that assistant TA role, like, what are some of the salary requirements that you see out there in these positions in other communities? So that we'd have a better idea of, are we in the position to do something with one individual, because then it would become full-time, and molding the two together, an assistant TA and the communications piece into one? I just, I could guess, but I don't want to guess, and is there a model out there that we could
Yeah,
kind of
we
see
can
what it
certainly-
looks like?
We can certainly gather that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that would be a very helpful next step. What
Yep.
do you think?
Sure, it'd probably be helpful. I'm a little concerned that I guess we've had discussions in the past about just letting you sort out the parameters of how to address the problem. We frame up what the main points of what we think need to be done, and tell you whether or not we'd support like a half-time or full-time position is fairly broad. And that's about as deep as I'd personally really want to go. I'd rather, for the most part, that you figure out the best way to restructure the departments or the staff internally to affect this. From a standpoint of what we actually need you to accomplish, I think it's been outlined a few times. I think I guess I'm worried about trying to give you too much very detailed direction about what to do in terms of how to proceed, because we've done this a few times, and it ends up coming up with a solution that then we have to change again later because it's a solution that's being sort of directed by us, and then when you try to put it in place, it doesn't quite fit. And I'd almost rather, I guess I'd sort of rather that we just stick with the broad points, like saying, yes, we think the coordination of communications is very important, and we'd support some sort of part-time solution to that. Culturally, we think it should be in-house as opposed to contracting out
Yeah,
to an
yeah.
outside company. So giving you these really broad parameters to fit the basic policy and culture of the town and letting you come up with a solution is how I'd prefer to go after it. Because I feel like if we give you a detailed description of what the position should be, we run the risk of you going back, putting together a plan, and then going to the staff and getting some reasonable criticism that it's not going to fit. We've done a couple of rounds of that. So I guess that makes me in a position where I'm shying away from giving you very specific and detailed direction
that's-
on what you should do.
Yeah, yeah. So as you say, so I'm happy to take that back. I mean, but it is helpful to know that you're saying yes to the communication coordination in-house effort, yes to eventually an in-house HR effort. It's not as clear to me what you're saying about a potential assistant TA.
Well, I mean, those were some conversations we'd had a while ago
Right.
in the larger picture of objectives and goals and
Right.
how do we get to those how do we meet those goals? So the assistant TA role or position kind of started floating up a little bit in terms of, is that gonna help get to the goals and objectives?
Right, so a very typical role for an assistant is HR. That's a very common model that you'll find in a lot of communities.
Well, so, I mean, I guess the HR piece really, we haven't seen that shared services report yet. So for me, the HR piece is kind of hanging over here until we see that.
Right,
And then
so-
either determine, yes, it's something we want to approach the next door neighbor with, that shared service opportunity, or no, we don't.
So when we
Then we'd know what we were doing with HR.
And
Right,
I'd
so-
be
so
really
on the HR
concerned.
piece, so Hamilton and Rockport are chomping at the bit to do it.
Hamilton and Rockport? Oh,
Hamilton for sure, Rockport had said yes, but I don't, yeah, they did actually do the dollars.
mhm.
Essex is not coming up with the dollars.
Oh, I see, okay,
So-
okay.
So when we talk about HR, is your definition for that the mechanical and logistic aspects of HR related to basic employment management, just the what we would think of as like paychecks, paperwork, details around the actual vacation time management, or is it the aspect of HR where you're dealing with personnel issues?
It's more of the personnel issues,
Right.
the interpersonal dynamics.
Right,
Okay.
mediation.
It's mediation, it's
Right.
assisting with contract negotiations and
Right.
contract union contract
Right,
management.
Okay.
It's hiring and firing process,
mhm,
performance reviews, making
Mhm.
sure those are being done
Mhm.
consistently, accurately,
mhm.
across the board.
Yeah, it's not so much the
It's not so
payroll
much-
aspect of
Right.
it, that's backroom, treasurer,
Right.
that kind of thing. It's more the human, the employee piece of it.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah.
given
Yeah.
that definition, then yes, I think that was definitely one of the goals that was in your goals that you needed to address. So yes,
So we just
that's
need to-
important.
We need you to present to us your best approach to address the human resources piece.
And for me, I really would like to know what potential time requirements would be and what the cost of that would be, and where we would be coming up.
On
with
our
the-
own and shared.
Yes, exactly. So whether we're doing it on our own or as Muffin says, or shared.
a
Because
shared
I
service.
think, I understand and agree with the needs. I get very concerned, as I know everybody does, with the town of fewer than 6,000 people, and how many employees do we have and have to pay for? With the whole package that would be given. That's why, I would, and where we anticipate that
The
money
funding.
coming
Yeah.
from.
So we did already allocate resources for about half-time position, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's already been done. It's whether or not we need to expand beyond that, which is,
But were those remind me, was that reserve?
that was,
No.
No, it was
that was
budgetary.
It was
budgetary.
new allocation.
Okay.
It was new allocation, yeah.
And that was by taxes?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just.
Yep.
Where the rest of that would then come from.
No, absolutely. That's part of the
So
discussion.
I know.
Eli, can you clarify that halftime position is a halftime TA, is a halftime HR,
It
is a
was-
halftime communicator?
It was town administrative salaries, and it was
Right.
not specific to a particular position. It was, the funding was approved at town meeting. So the point is that the resources are there for us to
To get us.
go get the halftime person
Get
to
something
execute
started.
on some of this. And the
Right.
question is the ultimate solution that he puts together going to require more than that? And if it does, then we bring it up to town meeting. And if it does, the question is, how do we proceed over the next 6 months? Do we, is there an incremental step to take, or do we have to go and ask for additional funds to support a position before we can actually execute on any of it? So
Well-
this is a bit of a, the actual execution phase after the design phase is done.
Because it seems to me that really understanding how a shared HR position would work is the next step. Because HR duties can expand and contract based on the kinds of issues you're dealing with. If you get a harassment complaint, that's covered by HR, and that needs to be an expansion time. And if you're sharing, how does that work? So I'd like to understand how a shared services position would work.
So that we should be hearing more about on the 19th, right?
You won't hear a lot of details.
No.
These are broad brush recommendations.
So we need to do our own research on what
So
it would mean.
it'll say, okay, do you like this recommendation? If you do, then there's a lot more work to be done on it.
Yeah, okay.
The report really is the nature of flagging ideas.
Yep.
Rather than providing real details of how those ideas would be implemented.
Okay.
All right.
That's too bad. Okay.
But we could have a clear understanding of what you expect from HR services within
Yes.
the
Oh,
town of
yeah.
Manchester.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And
No, I'm happy to work.
we
on
don't
that.
have that yet.
Correct.
Okay,
I'm happy to flesh that out more for you.
okay. Because
All right.
my limited experience with understanding HR duties is that
No, you're absolutely
they
right.
go like this.
Yes, they
Yeah,
do.
sure.
And it's like playing a
But we've reached a point where,
Slinky.
we need a person that can do this.
Yeah.
Just be directly involved and have it be their thing and their expertise, and not working on 3 other things and then shifting to an HR hat for 20 minutes and then
Yep.
shifting back to
Right,
the
though another,
DPW issue, and then it's time to get the HR piece in place.
right, but frankly, I mean, the current model is I absorb,
Well, right,
the expansion times.
Right.
So nothing to say that if you had an HR for this, and then when it grows here to here, here, that's the piece I'm taking up, not the whole piece. Anyways, I can play with that and show you some models.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's important to get it broken out, HR and the communications piece.
Bless you.
Just a straight proposal.
Yeah, frankly, I think where I would lean towards is sort of full throttle on the communications piece as a part-time hire, and as we continue to work on the other pieces. But let me put together a
Put it
few
together.
options, and
Okay.
we can do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
so you have enough now?
Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to the consent agenda. We have minutes from June 10th, July 12th, and July 22nd. It says July 8th, but we already approved those last meetings, so we don't need to do them here. Approving a deed of transfer for Zero Magnolia. That was actually what was voted on in town meeting. So we're just doing the formal paperwork on it. Some old street signs declared as surplus property from the DPW. Recommendation of change of title for Nate DeRosiers. In our package is a request from the DPW director to change his, just the title, nothing else about his position from, town projects and facilities manager to town engineer.
I do like the town engineer / facility manager.
Yeah, I would do the combination.
We put it in there, okay.
All right, so, so town engineer and facilities manager would be the proposal under this consent agenda. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
Well, the minutes, I've got a few corrections for the minutes.
Okay,
And then regarding the acceptance of the deed, we need to modify the spelling of my name.
Again, sorry.
No, that's all right, it's just, but if I'm going to be, it should be, so.
Yep.
That's on page 37 of the package we received.
Yep.
So
And
if we
then,
vote that deed tonight, we can stop in and sign it.
Becky,
Will that
you're
work?
so fussy about that.
I know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
why do
okay.
I care?
Okay, comments on minutes?
Comments on minutes. On page 16,
Which set of minutes?
that is the 6:10 minutes.
Okay.
So page 16, I had actually mentioned numerous times that I wanted sugar muzzled. And
Yeah,
there's,
you did.
I did, I was very adamant about that. And in here, it said that Mr. Steiner, so and I'm wondering if that's supposed to be me as opposed to Arthur. And that is in page 16, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Well, I think Arthur's not here to comment on it, but he
'Cause-
did make an initial comment about muzzling.
He did.
Right.
But I mentioned it several times very strongly, and I feel that should be in the minutes.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm sorry. I don't have the same, I don't have it online, so I'm just wondering.
Page 8.
Page 8.
oh, I'm
Page
sorry,
8.
yeah, that's, yes, page 8 in the actual minutes themselves, I'm
So
looking from.
The paragraph starts with,
Well, there is, as opposed to
Oh,
the
it's the
specific
top.
paragraph, I mentioned several times, that I felt the dog should be muzzled, and I wanted Sugar muzzled, and that's not mentioned in the minutes at all. So I just want to make sure that that gets in there somewhere.
Okay.
And that was it on that. I do have one other, in the minutes of the 722, which, I'll tell you what page that's on in a minute. That is on page 7 of 722. And third paragraph down. And it starts draft of new personal handbook, but it's personnel.
Personnel, yeah.
That's it.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, well, those changes, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed?
I'm sorry, who made them, I'm so sorry.
I made the motion,
Okay,
and Muffin
Muffin seconded.
seconded.
okay, thank you.
All right, under correspondence, we have a letter from Xfinity regarding municipal emergency reporting procedure, and we also have a request for a change in parking on Rosedale Avenue. This was sent to us on Wednesday of last week. We didn't have time to really process the initial request. I wanted to get some input from public safety and other departments, including legal, before we brought it before the board.
So here's a perfect time to talk about the whole process, and like I refer to white paper. This is a perfect example. The request should go out to all the departments in town hall that would have a touch on the issue, and ask them for their comments, research, methods of research, whatever, to be all put together in a paper that then would come to the board as information. That's, I think, the way we need to approach these kinds of
Right.
requests.
That's right.
What was the response to the letter?
The response was, we are going to do that, and that's why it's not going on the agenda for today.
Okay.
Right.
So
Because
that's
we
why
did
it's in
get another
correspondence.
email.
And we legally can't. I mean, that's the other part of it. There's not enough, so it's not just the board saying, well, we're gonna check with others first, but we have to have time that it actually has to be noted on the agenda within a specific time frame. Correct?
Yes, eventually,
So that's-
if you're going to
right.
that level, yeah.
Right.
Right.
But that's, so that, I just wanted to make that clear.
And we did receive another email at about 10 minutes of 4 from the requester. Pretty much
Asking
the
for us
same.
to
It's pretty
discuss it
much the
tonight.
same request.
Right.
But I just wanted to put out there so that we know what our process is
Yes.
moving forward for any issues like this, requests that come in.
I'm not exactly sure what they're requesting.
Well,
That
you
is
know what?
part of the reason.
Right.
It's a little bit vague and not
Right.
clear, and that's part of the reason why I didn't put it on the actual agenda. But
Because
I
there's a
wanted to
difference
be
between the
clarified.
documents that were in our packet and what was in the email.
Yes, so that's why we need to just leave it into the hands of town hall to gather the information from all the appropriate departments and put it together. And I would imagine that will include some of those departments having a conversation with the individual
Yep.
that's making the request. Yeah,
So he didn't include me in that
No.
latest, so if you might
Yep.
forward that, I can.
all right.
All right, so that's all I wanted more than actually what I wanted to talk about on that particular topic tonight. So, town administrator's report.
So first topic is corollary, I guess I would say, and that has to do with speed limits.
Same thing, I think we need to just put that whole process in place for this. And I love
So-
the idea of a group of interested citizens.
Well, so the only concern that I have there is that we actually have multiple competing committees now who may have different recommendations, and
Well, sure, yeah.
well, what I was wondering was whether or not it, given the number of different potential competing interests, if some board member needs to volunteer to be involved in that process, because otherwise, how is it gonna, well, what is the direction? Are they gonna kick around and all develop 14 different, suggestions and options? And who is supposed to shepherd that?
I don't think it should be the board. I think that's where we've gotten caught going down the rabbit hole in the past.
Okay, but we have two different committees who actually feel like it's their domain.
And that's news to me, so.
There's
I-
DIP,
I
and
mean,
then there's bike
But
ped.
that actually
Right, but
falls,
that-
this falls on us.
Well,
speed limit.
it would, yes, eventually. I think what I'm trying to get at is, we want to make sure all the stakeholders, the boards and committees that might have an interest in this, departments like police and fire that might have an interest in it, and interested citizens have an opportunity to work through what these concerns are.
Yeah, but you know what? This is one of those cases where it's gonna be public facing, fairly rapidly. There's gonna be,
Yep.
I've spoken to residents who are saying, hey, should I go and write letters to the cricket? And I'm like, well, no. First, I think you should do X, Y, and Z. You should go to bike pad, you do this, do the other thing. I think if we don't, do something a little bit proactive in terms of setting the public engagement and then defining the public engagement, it's going to be defined for us, and then we're gonna have a different situation on our hands. That's,
Potentially. I just feel like all sides, if that's what you want to call, all beliefs should be put down on the paper. If, the DIP doesn't have to agree with the bike ped doesn't have to agree with the DPW doesn't have to agree with the police.
But
It'd be
part-
nice if they all do, if we get to that point with it. I guess what I'm saying, Eli, is I think it needs to come to us in a form of a recommendation.
but I think
Well,
we
I think
need
he's
to,
saying there won't be one recommendation.
right, we need.
Well, and so if there's two recommendations, then there's two recommendations, and then one has to be chosen.
But we need to give those committees some sort of direction about what we would like them to.
And then it's 5 people that have been perceived to make the decision.
That's, yes.
And that's what concerns me.
Yep.
Does
Well,
that,
but
am I making
No,
sense with
but
that?
I'm not concerned about these 5 people making the decision. I'm concerned that there is a perception of how the other change was gotten to. I am concerned about, the part where, what was it about? The regulatory limits supersede statutory limits. I think that we have some situations that we have created that are real potential problems. And that's.
We have some straightening out to do, there's no
Right.
question.
Because of
And
the way we made some of the decisions is what's put, so
Well,
that's,
no,
so
but
that's to
what the
my
limits
point.
themselves are, what the speed limits specifically are, is problematic. So,
So I don't think that I don't think the board should be going to tell the committees what to do, but I think that the board should put together some letter describing the various different issues, because I'm not sure that the various different boards and the various different committees know all the information
They
that's
don't.
currently in this
Yeah, they
packet.
don't know all this.
So I think that some sort of summary letter saying, for these reasons, we would like you to,
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's perfect. I would think that would be a logical setup to putting a group of people around a table
Yep.
to discuss an issue anyway.
Pardon me while I jump in here, because this all happened before I
happened before I
plunked
got
down
here,
in this
too.
chair. And I have a real basic question. how is this decision made in the first place that it hadn't been vetted through DOT and the other, the only other party to that conference call that you refer to in your notes is Bruce Tarr's office, but that, I mean, DOT's guidelines make a lot of common sense as well as regulatory sense. And it seems like the decision was made based on just the distance from the train station, and that was that.
Yeah, it was
And
the
then all the
metric-
signs got changed.
It was the metric that was chosen to use.
So who changed the signs?
Well, once decisions, God bless.
That's you.
Did it go past this board?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and that was the metric that was chosen and agreed upon to use. Was
And
from the train station. Best decision in the world? Potentially not, but that's what happened.
okay, all right. I
And it
don't-
was reviewed by multiple committees and the DPW director as well. So there were multiple departments
Yeah.
that discussed it and discussed the potential legality
And
of it.
nobody
whether or not-
raised the issue about maybe we should talk to DOT?
No, there was.
Yeah.
And DOT was wishy-washy about it.
Yeah, that was part of the problem too. DOT was not,
They weren't being definitive.
they were not firm in their answers. Yes.
Okay,
And they're still
But
not
now I
firm.
will say,
because it's,
staff and directors within DOT have changed and evolved since when we were doing this. And it is one of the reasons that there are now some more concrete information and answers that come out of DOT. It's a regulatory department that was in a little bit of a disarray. So that's now why there's somewhat more concrete information coming out of
And
them.
that was the prior, also the prior the interim DPW,
Yeah.
so.
okay.
So maybe or maybe not the best decision that was made, but was made with the right intentions, with the information that we had at the time and the answers we were given at the time.
And
So-
as far as communication on that one,
Well, I feel like there was a
was there
fair,
good communication, do you feel? Because,
it depends on who you ask.
Yeah. So there was
Depends on where
discussion
you
about
live.
it at town meeting. There were multiple public forums. There were multiple meetings before the Board of Selectmen. So
Right.
yes, there was quite a bit of discussion about it.
Right.
Now, if you talk to some people, they'll tell you, oh, we never heard about this at all. And then if you talk to other people, they'll say, yeah, we did talk about this a lot. And they'll point out the discussions that we had in town meeting and before that. And the discussions went back for before we went to town meeting with it as well. So there were a lot of opportunities for people to raise concerns. And there are people on both sides of the fence of the issue, even now. There are people who are quite happy with the changes that we made. There were people who wanted us to be more aggressive with the changes that we made. So, yes, this was talked about a lot.
park your car on the border of the town and then walk in? Sorry.
Yeah. It's one of those things where there was no clear, absolutely clear right thing to do. And it becomes one of those hard issues that we
I
have
apologize,
to
that
address.
was the cheap shot.
No, that's,
So, I don't want to belabor this topic too much tonight, but what I want to get some guidance on is if we write that letter saying, hey, for these reasons, we want you to take a second look. The departments that it should go to, I think, are police and DPW, the DIP committee, bike ped, fire. Who else?
Greg, is there anyone else?
Maybe the clerk's office, just 'cause
oh, yes, yep,
tickets.
yep. Mhm.
All right. So I will,
You have a member in the audience.
I will give you 2 minutes at the outside. Because we're not really debating this. We're going to be moving on to the next process. So if you, so I will say, if your comments about the benefits of the speed limits one way or the other, tonight's not the right time for them.
Well, I just came tonight because I read in the Cricket that this was going to be discussed. The recommendation that was made by the Downtown Improvement Committee.
I'm sorry, could I interrupt a minute? Please state, speak into the mic and state your name and address, please.
Active.
Yeah.
Steve Rosenthal, 6 Crooked Lane. I came because I read in the Cricket that the Downtown Improvement Committee had made some recommendations for changes to the speed limits, and I wanted to give my input. I'm interested in hearing the discussion you have, because I'm glad to hear, really, that there's a lot of disagreement about the speed limits, and that they're not locked in stone, because I think in a lot of cases that their speed limits here are ridiculous. Some of the speed limits are laughable, and they're not being observed, and they're not being enforced because they're laughable. And the police know they're laughable. There used to be a policeman parked at the bottom of Moses Hill on Pine Street, catching guys speeders going in either direction. They're not there anymore. They're never there. So I would like to know, as a citizen, you mentioned a whole lot of committees, but I'd like to know as a citizen how to have some input into this.
So the letter that I talked about writing, where we actually go out to the other committees and ask them to revisit this, will result in those committees having meetings to discuss this. They will post public meetings that you can go and comment at, and they will capture that input and make it part of their recommendations back to us. And then ultimately,
That's the Bike and Pedestrian Committee and the Downtown Improvement Committee?
yes, and ultimately, those committees will come back to us with a bunch of recommendations and the various different town departments. And this board, based on the input that we receive, will most likely hold another public forum and have this discussed. At the very least, we'll have it discussed in one of our board meetings, and it'll be an agenda item to discuss it. This board makes the decision.
But I think this speaks directly to one of the issues of communication. And where somebody reads that this is going to be discussed.
But-
But the part of the problem is that most people do not understand when they will have an opportunity to speak and what the agenda really means. And I don't know if there's a way that we can say this at the beginning of every meeting, because frankly, I think it's great that people show up. We want people to be here. But they don't want to waste their time coming when they're not going to be able to speak.
Okay, but the thing is this actually wasn't on this agenda.
Well, it's part of the town
It wasn't listed,
administrators.
it was in the paper, but
Oh, in the Cricket, yes.
It
Oh, it was in the Cricket?
It was in
I
the
have not
Cricket
seen the
that the
paper.
Downtown Improvement Committee had discussed this. And
I
that,
talked to Sonia this afternoon and asked her if I would have an opportunity to speak about this, and she said yes.
Okay.
That it was going to be part of the town administrator's report, and I would have an opportunity to speak, and that's why I'm
Right.
here.
I see.
Which is as it should, I mean.
Exactly.
That's
Thank
how
you,
it should
Steve.
be, yes.
So I think probably what makes sense is the next step would be a piece in the Cricket, talking about the fact that the groups are gonna come together
Yeah.
and discuss the issue. You should also feel free to reach out to the police chief and the fire chief anytime you wanted to let them know your feelings, because
I've already had it out with the police.
those are two departments that should be weighing in as well. You know, I think we need to alert people that it's back on, and this is no pun intended, but back on the radar.
Yep. Mwah.
Back on the radar because of some more information that we now are in possession of.
That was not
with-
available at that.
That was not available, that we struggled getting with DOT. and that some of the concerns are going to be reviewed, or whatever,
And can we-
however.
Can we also put something that speaks to how our meetings run? What we may or may not legally discuss if it's not on the agenda, that we're not allowed to be deliberating something. But let people know that the time for public comment is in the beginning. Just let people know what it means and why we have to hold a meeting the way we do.
Yeah. I would like to move on from this topic now, because we're actually.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming in.
Continuing on the town
Yeah,
administrator.
okay, so, I'll give you some background on the compost operations. We have a need to sit down with, probably makes sense to sit down with Finance Committee and have a joint meeting to hear a presentation from the vendor and how they would propose moving forward with the project. So potentially this, if you want to proceed with it, it would take a town meeting vote. And given the timeline, that should happen this fall. So this would be an article potentially for a fall town meeting. So I didn't know if, I would assume we're looking at an early September time to sit down with the Finance
I
Committee,
would think so, yeah.
given
I
the
mean-
difficulty of August and.
Well, and here we are already in the first week in
Right,
August,
right,
yeah.
right.
What would the first meeting in September be? Are they?
Third.
they're- Ours would be the 3rd. Are they Wednesday?
They typically meet Wednesdays, so I
Wednesdays.
didn't know if you were up for 2 meetings that week, or you want to aim for the next week. Perhaps meeting the 5th, the 12th,
Well, the 12th is a Thursday.
I'm sorry, the 11th.
The 11th, yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
right,
I think it's something we need to figure out what we're gonna do.
Right,
I mean,
And I am away those first 2 weeks.
the first 2 weeks. Okay.
And I'll be away on the 11th.
Right, so the 11th is not good.
then why don't we see if FinCom can join us on the 3rd?
Yep.
Because that's our regular meeting after Labor Day, right?
Right.
Yeah. Do we want to see, versus pushing it out
Away.
a couple
That's-
weeks? Oh, but you said you weren't
I'm,
going to be
I'm
here.
away. I've got to go take care of my parents. But, yeah, it's.
Well,
sorry about-
Because if this is going to be a fall town meeting ticket,
I hate to
In
push it off
October
too
and
long.
November.
Yeah,
I hate to push it off in terms of, because there'll probably be follow-up discussions that are going to be needed, and
well, yeah, right.
I just
Well-
think we ought to get the ball going, and there'll
So
be
if we did that on
subsequent-
September 3rd, there'd be a follow-up.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I think if you could see if they could,
long as
would
you've
that
got
work? Yeah,
quorum,
I don't know what
right,
an
so-
agenda's gonna look like for that day, but.
Yeah.
Just background information on the Harbor Master Office there.
Yep.
Again, just reiterating, we did not get the grant that was applied for. There will be still plenty of opportunity to have public input. We'll be gearing up to get a designer on board and giving us some schematics that then will be the baseline for a public presentation.
Okay.
So that'll be coming up. We're continuing to work on a settlement for the new dog issue.
Mhm.
So at this point, we won't have a hearing on the 12th.
Okay.
That doesn't mean we've succeeded, but we're still
Not on
pushing
the
to
12th.
succeed.
Okay.
And so we'd rather
Take that off.
push that off a bit.
So we're taking that off?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, just background information on waterfront usage, and been busy. The trash has been, continues to be a problem.
Yeah.
So this morning, there's plenty of room in the dumpsters, but people didn't put them in the dumpsters, and the birds got it and spread it all over. So
Yeah.
it's an ongoing struggle.
To that and the waterfront use, the beach, the harbor, the docks, the whole thing, will Bion and Cheryl be coming in at some point?
Yes.
Early fall?
Yes.
Okay, we'll get
Give
them
us
on an
a
agenda to
wrap-up sort
kind of
of
give
the
us a,
season and
yeah,
how
because
things
I think,
went and what are the issues, yes.
okay, great.
Yep.
And what do most beach communities do? Do they, most of them provide dumpsters, or do most communities in our type of area make
Yeah.
people
And
carry
so
it out.
Gloucester's carry in, carry out.
Yep.
They don't provide the dumpsters.
And how does that work? I mean, do they end up with as much trash all over
No.
the place as we do?
No.
I would bet this is something Cheryl and Parks and Rec Committee will work on over the winter and
Yes.
Okay.
kind of delve into that research and figure it out.
So it's some do carry on, carry out, and others provide the dumpsters. So it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. So I think that's enough for me now. We do have the two executive sessions.
Before we go to executive
So, I don't
section, I have
know
two
that clock.
questions pertaining to, just bring this up. Page 9, where'd that go? Ugh, sorry. Where'd that go? Sorry. Okay, well, some reason it's gone missing on mine. But Greg, these are questions for you, and Sonia, you might be able to help me with this. On 6:10, the minutes, and I'm not sure what page this would be on. There we go. Just Sue Thorne made a comment, and I just wanted to know if anything was done to address that. And it was a comment Sue Thorne had made.
Oh, about the stairs, the concrete.
Yes,
the-
thank you.
Right. Yeah, the grouting.
Right.
Okay, yes, thank you. Do you know, has anything been done to address that?
We haven't addressed it yet. It's on Nate's list of items.
It's on the list.
Okay, but it is on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing regarding Paul Barkley's issue of his house flooding 3 times and not being,
Right, so
nobody
they-
got
they-
back to him
so
very
the-
quickly?
They got passed and they didn't have to come back, so it was that one set of unfortunate backflows.
Right, okay.
But it was over with after that Friday.
Okay, but that was addressed. Did somebody get back to Paul on that also? Just
Yeah.
to, okay, I just wanted to
Yep.
circle back on those. Thank you. Okay.
Are we discussing at all any further the harbor master office at Reed?
Nope,
Not
it's
right
not on the
now.
agenda,
Right,
no.
no.
No, we can't, yeah.
All right, so I will take a motion to move to executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Paragraph A, Subsection 6, and Subsection 3, to consider the purchase of real estate and also to discuss strategy with respect to possible litigation regarding the water plant, not to return to open session.
Second.
All in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Bowling, yes. Ms. Driscoll?
Yes.
Ms. Jakes?
Yes,
Mr. Turner?
Mr.
Bob.
Bodmer Turner says yes.
Sorry.
okay.
All right,